Did you know every kanji has one radical? Even if the kanji looks like it has 5 radicals, it still only has one. Well, kind of, but we'll talk about that more later. First off, why is there only one radical in a kanji? Well, it stems from the fact that there are basically 2 different definitions of a radical. As you're most likely already familiar with, there's the concept of radicals as the small characters that make up kanji. And if you were asked how many radicals were in the character, you would probably count these. And that would not be incorrect because these are radicals. However, each kanji has one official radical to it, listed in dictionaries and dictionaries pretty much. It's basically just 2 different definitions for the same word. So from now on, to refer to the main radical in a kanji, I will use the word bushu and radical for everything else. Also, if you already know how to guess the stroke order, that really helps to identify these main radicals a lot. So that was the what of these bushu, but why? Why only use one radical when there's others in the kanji? Well, that's mainly because of paper dictionaries. Compared to the online dictionaries that are present today, which list every radical allowing you to choose multiple and suggesting the kanji using them, paper dictionaries did not have that luxury. So, to get over the weakness of paper dictionaries not being interactable and having computer power, a system was designed which is actually pretty simple. This system being the Kangxi radical system. This is a set of 214 radicals that are used to classify all of the kanji used in Japanese. And you might notice Kangxi sounds a little weird. I'm also pronouncing it wrong, but it doesn't really sound or look like Japanese at all, made quite obvious by the X sitting in there. That's because it came from Chinese. Originally, there was the Shihui dictionary which used a similar radical organization system. However, it was not widely accepted until the Kangxi dictionary was released. After that, it eventually became one of the main ways people sorted dictionaries, and it makes sense why. Using just a few steps, which I'll talk about later, you identify the radical of a kanji, then you flip to that radicals section in the dictionary, basically weeding out 1,000 incorrect kanji in a second. Why not use another method though, like sorting by alphabetical order of the reading? I bring this up because of little pocket dictionaries like this. While it's not the same because it isn't a kanji dictionary, it's a word dictionary, it's basically impossible to find a word in here if you don't know how to pronounce it. Though you probably aren't supposed to use this for reading. I assume it's more for speaking since it's a pocket dictionary. Anyways, my point there is the one radical method is probably the most efficient way you can group kanji in a paper dictionary. Relying on things like alphabetical order means people need to know how to pronounce the kanji. And if it's a kanji they've never seen before, they're probably going to have a hard time finding it in alphabetical order. Trying to do something like organizing by reading would just be horribly inefficient. If you don't know the reading, you might be turning pages for a decade until you get lucky enough to find the kanji you were looking for. Other, less efficient, though useful in their own way, are semantic types of dictionaries like this one, where things would be put into different categories that you would search by, which is good if you're the one writing. And then there's purely stroke count dictionaries for when you meet a kanji that you can't quite identify the main radical. Though let's hope that doesn't happen because the efficiency of the Kangxi dictionary I talked about earlier is lost. With the introduction out of the way, how do you actually identify the radical in a kanji? First off, it's important to mention that there will be characters that will try to trick you. Basically little ghost radicals that don't actually exist. Well, they do exist, but not in the sense that they are a real radical. And only real radicals will work to find the main radical in a kanji. For instance, in a word like this, the thing on the left side is not actually a radical, so you would find yourself pretty lost in a paper dictionary trying to find that. There's also radicals that have multiple appearances, a lot of radicals actually. So it's good to get familiar with the variants. That way you don't get stuck looking for something that doesn't exist again. Except this time it does exist, it's just in a different shape. The next thing is the positions. There's 7 main positions. Left side, hen. Right side, tsukuri. On top, kanmuri. On the bottom, ashi. Tare is northwest. Nyo is southwest. And then kamae, which is anything that encloses the kanji, but not on the top left or the bottom left. Now onto the actual steps of how to find the radical. The first step is to see if the entire kanji is a radical. Here's some examples. It does get kind of hard though with the more complex radicals that are not seen often. And some of them are so complex it makes it really easy to mistake them as a full kanji, and you can even see other little radicals inside of them. The next step is to find if it only has one radical. Similar to the last step, there might only be one part. Those parts I said would try to trick you earlier are what you have to rule out in this step. In this character, for instance, the thing on the top is not actually part of the radical. The radical here is the barb. After you figure out those 2 things, then we get to use the 7 radical locations we just talked about. First, you start with enclosure. Is there a radical that covers 2 to 4 sides of the kanji? If yes, that will be your radical. Then you go to the left. If there is an obvious radical on the left, meaning it is not covered and has nothing below it, and is also not intersecting anything, then that is the radical. If that doesn't work, then do the same for the right side. Next, if there's something covering the top, that is the radical. If there are 2 or more parts on the top though, the radical could be at the bottom. You're basically trying to find the section of the kanji that is the most simple. If there is clutter somewhere, avoid it and find the most standalone radical. If the top looks messy, go to the bottom. If the right looks messy, go to the left. It is important to follow the order though, going from left, right, top to bottom. Then, if those fail, do the same with the northwest, northeast, southeast, and southwest. Basically going clockwise around the kanji, trying to find the radical in a corner. Then, the very last step is the inside. If everything else fails, then the radical might just be in the middle. And there is kind of a bonus step. While not listed in the steps, it is very important. If there are two kanji in the same spot, pick the one with more strokes. For instance, if there is one unobstructed kanji on the left and one unobstructed kanji on the right, the one with more strokes should be chosen. This can be seen in the kanji for bird, where both the left and the right side have unobstructed radicals, and you might go for the mouth radical because it's on the left. However, the bird radical should be chosen because it has more strokes. So using these steps, it should be possible to identify all the main radicals in any kanji. Should is the key word though, because of course it can't be that simple. Though it does work a majority of the time. The times where it won't work is going to be the missing radicals caused by the simplification of Japanese by the government. Basically, when the Japanese government simplified kanji, some of them lost their main radical. The solution they came up with for this was to give the kanji new radicals. Though it is kind of confusing. For instance, the radical here would just be a line, and the radical here would be person. And as an extra challenge, some dictionaries might have their own quirks. That's pretty much all though for the radical identification system. I actually kind of prefer this method sometimes, as I take too long when trying to find the radical in the dense options for the radical search. It's pretty easy to accidentally skim over the correct one. If you want to try one of these types of main radical or bushu dictionaries, this one is pretty cool. You choose the main radical, and then the results that come up are also labeled with yellow if it's a person's name and red if it's common. So hopefully now you should be pretty familiar with the main radical system. Thanks for watching though. Good luck on your radical finding journey, and don't fall for the fake radicals. Please do like and subscribe if this video was helpful and if you enjoyed. Thank you, bye bye.